further ado, I'm going to introduce the representatives from Spherion. First, I wanted to introduce Cindy, and then she's going to talk to you a little bit about what Spherion is, and then we'll get on to the presentation. Thanks.
Hi, thank you so much, Jenny, for having us. We're excited to be here. We've been in Champaign since 1981. We are a staffing company. We started out doing traditional temporary employment staffing. Obviously, the landscape of hiring and attracting employees has changed over the years. We then moved into temp to hire. We do a lot of temp to hire still. We still do temporary. And then we also do direct hire recruiting. I have Kim with me, and she's my local direct hire recruiter. She came to me from Wolfram. She did technical recruiting there and has also been with another local staffing company prior to that. So we have a lot of experience on our staff. We've been doing this for quite a while, but what's so interesting about it is that it is constantly changing, and right now technology is becoming so much more a part of what we do. We just got back from a conference in Florida, and there's video interviewing now, there's recruiting job fairs on chat things, and I mean, it's just keeping up with the technology is almost a full-time job for us. But the basics of knowing and understanding your community and how to attract and recruit people to come to work for you is part of what we do. It's part of our 36 plus years of experience. So I'm excited to be here to share that with you, and excited to introduce Patti Dunning, who is our Vice President of Sales and came to us from North Carolina today, so she's not really excited about the weather that we're having for her, but she's going to endure that, and she's here to share with you a lot of interesting information. And feel free to, I know she's got a timeline, but feel free to interject questions if you have them, and we're excited to help you in being successful in our community.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes? Good? Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you today and to share the findings of this study. Cindy was telling you, yeah, technology is important, but it's also tech and touch, right? Especially when it comes to recruiting candidates, because they want to feel that human connection. They say that sometimes with more technology today, that's some of what's missing. So we try to balance all of that. That's not exactly what this whole presentation is about, but when Cindy mentioned that, it just jogged that thought for me. So again, our emerging workforce study is something that we've been conducting for 20 years now. And we started back in 1997 because we were seeing changing dynamics in the workplace. And as a large employer ourselves, we wanted to better understand that from the employee perspective. Back in 2005, then, we started surveying companies as well, because we wanted to get that 360-degree view of what was going on with employees and what were companies and employers doing to respond to those shifting values and mindsets. So I've been presenting the findings on this study since 2003, and it's always fun for me to see how the things change. A couple of key points on our history is that this isn't a survey that Spherion does of its customers and its employees. It's a nationally representative survey conducted on our behalf by a third party, so it's statistically valid in its findings. The other thing is, it's not just generations or geography that involves this. It really is about the workforce and the workplace at large. We've been asking some of the same questions since the inception of the study so that we could get that trending data, but we've also incorporated new questions. 20 years ago, we didn't have anything that we have today in social media, and so we've incorporated a lot of that as we've gone through as well. There's a lot of data that you'll see in and on this presentation. Don't worry about all of that. One of the things that we handed you was this web key, and that will link you right into our Spherion.com Emerging Workforce Study site. And a lot of the data and facts are on there. So again, a lot of numbers on here, and I'm going to try to share the highlights for you in a brief time. Yes?
Is any of that data set publicly available?
Yes, on the presentation itself isn't available, but the data is on the website. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You bet. I think the other thing that's important to note just from that previous slide, that the other thing about our study is that it's not only a look back, it's a look forward. So we're not just measuring what happened in the past, we want to see how that affects the way we're going. And so again, I talked about 20 years of data. So one of the questions we asked when we conducted the study in 2017 was, how do you feel the workforce has changed? And when we asked employees, obviously certain things like productivity and technology being better, certain things maybe not as much, not as good. Morale, benefits, training that's offered, etc. And several things unchanged. Well, in this study, all over the years, we oftentimes identify disconnects between what employees think and what employers think employees think. And in this case, it wasn't so different. When we asked companies what they thought had happened over the past 20 years, they were a little more positive. Really felt like a lot of things had gotten better. And in some ways they have. But again, I think it just goes to, both agreed that morale is worse in the workplace. And that's going to be a highlight of what we talk about today with engagement and retention and how important that is. So I just thought it was kind of interesting. And one of the reasons there might be some of that differing feeling between employees and employers is when we think about the workplace today versus 20 years ago, we had a more narrow definition as companies. It was blue collar or white collar, it was agriculture or tech or industry, and it was, healthcare, et cetera, versus differences. And we also had a differing perception of solving problems. It was more like a one-size-fits-all. We, saw a problem, put a solution in place. And the workplace isn't one-size-fits-all anymore. Within each of those areas I mentioned, there's so much more diversity in our workplace today. There's so many more lifestyle differences and generations in the workplace, etc. So it's not just what worked in the past with, we're going to take this homogeneous look at a problem and solve it, isn't going to work as we move into the future. This example about playing outside, so pretty obviously, I'm a baby boomer, not a millennial, but 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, kids were much more imaginative when they went outside to play, right? Had to create their vision of what they were going to do and be. Today, they play outside, but probably using technology more, and so there's really where they're entertained versus imagining and entertaining themselves. So just differing, and that's one thing that we thought was a pretty good analogy to use. I know this is a little bit of an eye chart. There's a couple of those, so I'll try to give you the key points of the data without spending too much time on it. When we started the study, we identified 3 groups of individuals. Emergent, which are individuals who are looking to take more responsibility for their own career and their career path, and look to contribute to the company, as being the basis for their rewards and recognition. Migrating employees are the ones that are kind of switching more from a traditional mindset. The traditional mindset, a little more paternalistic view, looked for guidance and leadership on the part of the company versus taking their own responsibility for it. So I can share more about that in the interest of time. I'm not going to go into too much detail. All 3 groups of these workers are important. And just because you're, emergent, that doesn't mean it's only millennials. That doesn't mean it's East Coast, West Coast versus here in the Midwest, which is, by the way, even though I don't like the cold where I grew up in Wisconsin. So happy to be back in the general vicinity. But all of these workers are important to our companies. It's really just a matter of which job do employees thrive in. On the company side, there's also what we call these emergent practices. In other words, what makes that company appealing to all types of workers. And it is all of the things you see here, work-life balance. And it's really about how we look to find our individuals, utilizing the right recruiting methods and social media, etc. It's really measuring engagement and retention and how we pay attention to what's important to the employees in our own company. And it's really our employer brand. It's how are we identified as companies that is going to do all of those things of attracting, engaging, and recruiting talent. The difference between companies that have emergent practices and companies that don't are the way they approach each of those things that you see on the screen here. And the reason I mention that, the reason it's important, is because if you have an emergent worker, they're going to be happy in a company that has this emergent mindset. But they are not going to be thriving and happy in a company that is entrenched with traditional values. And a lot of that is what I was talking about the workplace years ago and the way companies looked at things. So those employees, if they might be attracted to that company, aren't going to be inclined to stay at that company. But traditional employees, they can be happy in either environment, because traditional employees, even though they have that more, they want that paternalistic view, they really just want to understand the rules and what's expected of them. So in this case, all employees are happy and can thrive in an emergent workforce. Really, the biggest thing to pay attention to is this bucket here on personal connection and this bucket here on online sources. This is a question that this past year we asked in a different way, and it was more of a free-form question versus a multiple choice answer. And so I think that our responses came out a little differently. But those two things are very connected, because we talk about networking and a personal connection being most important, but a lot of that is done online through chats and portals and things now, not just one-on-one networking in person. So I think that those two buckets are the key ways where we're really in sync. Certain markets, certain generational groups, classified ads, certain jobs might still apply. Staffing agencies like ourselves, only because of word of mouth. If we've got relationships with companies, they come to us. And again, the social media looks low, but I think a lot of that's low because it got grouped into this online bucket as well. One thing that is so much more important today for companies is the online reputation that they have. Employees today, 64% overall, say that the reputation of a company is as important as the offer that they receive. That number grew 13% just from 2016 to 2017. And not only that, when you look at millennials and Gen Z, you know that it's important. So the reputation that we have and our employer brand, as we mentioned, is so important, and we need to be managing that because it's out there whether we're putting it out there or not. Outside of salary and outside of that reputation that I just talked about, what else is important to employees? Things like the location and the commute. Obviously not so much right here because you're right in this general locale, but in general, a company, the mission that they believe in, the person they'll be working for, and really the flexibility, right, on the position. So it's really about as much of telling a story about our jobs as in just recruiting for our jobs. And I use an analogy or a story that I was in Ohio last year, and I called on a company that was looking for a couple of workers they were asking us about. One was a CNC operator, skill set that's pretty hard to find these days, a lot of computerized technology in that field now. And it was a sheet metal fabricator. Sounds kind of boring jobs when you think about it just on paper. But then I was looking at, we were in the lobby of that company, and what does that company do? Well, they build those mobile kiosks that you see everywhere, right, from car rental places to so many other things. And it was like, whoa, we need to bring the job to life as companies. We need to talk about why people do what they do, not just the nuts and bolts of the job that we do. And Fortune magazine had an article in their magazine a year or so ago that talked about just that, about storytelling and using our own employees as brand ambassadors to really bring company positions to life. Just to sum up this section, LinkedIn and Facebook on the company side probably still rule as the social media site, but goodness knows that even within Facebook, we know everything's videos today, right? Every single thing is bringing it to life. And so a lot of what we see with texting and SMS and videos and YouTube, which, we're recording this session, are for things like that as well. So I think it's in the future, the more we do, we're going to recognize all of the different avenues, and as Cindy mentioned when she was up here, just all of the new tools and technology that's available to us as well. Twitter has come on board. We hashtag everything now with ways to identify what we're looking for. Okay. We spend a lot of time, especially as organizations, and dollars in finding the right people. But we really need to be spending at least that amount of effort in how we're going to engage individuals and certainly retain those individuals as well. And I think one of the things that troubles me personally here is when we look at measuring engagement. Engagement is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not one company decides what to do and another company can just copy that, because your group of employees is different, what your company does is different. So it really has to be tailored for your organization. But we think, oh, 59% of companies are measuring it, but it really means that 40% of companies aren't measuring engagement. And employee feedback is the one thing that really can drive that change. So it's important to know what is helping your employees feel engaged today. We all agree that it's difficult to measure. Sometimes, again, is it a disconnect? Or is it sometimes in the definition of how people define what engagement is? And maybe that's where we have the hardest time wrapping our arms around it. But again, 21% of employers say, oh, they believe their employees are highly engaged, and 56% of employees feel like they're highly engaged. So a little bit skewed there. In our study, we asked that question the same way. So interesting on how people perceive what that really means. So if we look at a corporate culture, right, if you've got somebody who's engaged in there, I mean, they're going to say it's productive, we're collaborative. Yeah, probably a little bit stressful as we're trying to solve challenges, but I have a management team that's approachable, we're, in a peer organization. Disengaged workers, maybe, a little bit more glass half empty there, but stressful and indifferent and feel like, there isn't a real culture there, a state of culture for them. And it's not that we want to just connect the ideal job. Is the ideal perfect job everywhere? But employees today want a company that lives up to its promises, that really uses their reputation and their employer brand to help employees achieve their passions. Our youngest workers today, all of our workers, we all want to make the world a better place, but our younger workers really want to make the world a better place, and they want to be part of a company that advocates for the things that they believe in as well. So when you look at employees overall, feel it's important that a company lives up to its promises, and again, the passions, it's higher even for Gen Z and our millennials. So really an important thing to be considering. And yet, companies, especially according to our younger workers, fall short in several different ways, where they either don't host volunteer events, they might make periodic contributions, sponsor events that really help, or charitable programs, or might encourage employees to do so, but on their own time. And these are things that companies can look at that make a difference, that make our local economy better and our local culture better, and also, again, keep our employees really feeling that we're walking that walk, that our mission, vision, and values aren't just words that are posted somewhere, in the company lobby. And this is why it's important, right? I mean, engagement is all about an employee's willingness to do, be as productive as they can, to go that extra mile for the company, to be happy at work. And when you've got engaged workers, things like their belief in the company's strength, their willingness to stay 5 years, their trust in leadership, that they're making good decisions, and really feeling that their contributions are impactful to the organization. Those numbers are hugely different when employees are engaged versus our least engaged workers. And this is when it starts to lead to turnover. And again, these numbers, 3 months, 31%, 12 months, 44%, those are our younger workers in the world of work today. But wow, those are staggering statistics, especially when we pay a lot of money to attract and recruit people, and we might invest in training those individuals, and then the minute we do, they're looking for a new opportunity because something's not right. Well, when we ask workers why, two of the top 4 things you see here, feeling undervalued or feeling that they don't have, good growth prospects, I would like to suggest that that's more a matter of communication than it is just money. It's really about our workers feeling that there's a place for them. And I have a ton of stories that I can tell, and I probably won't at this, but I know that daughters and sons of friends of mine and my own kids, when they've been disillusioned with their first jobs or career path out of college, it's really because the job doesn't measure up to what they studied for. And a lot of times, we look to our first jobs as being an extension of our education as employees, and we've got to, as companies, paint that picture. We've got to help them understand what the career path is. There are many ways that we can make people feel valuable and that they're contributing on the job, recognition that we can provide that doesn't cost a lot of money. And those are the kind of things that, again, companies can invest in without just throwing more money at the problem. But if we don't, that's where that real disconnect is, because employees need help connecting the dots of seeing the job I do today and what it means to the company and feeling valued. And the one story I will tell is when I was I wasn't personally, but I was in Wisconsin, and a gentleman shared this story of being at a pizza parlor in South Carolina, in Charleston, I think. And he saw this young, probably a college-age student that was bussing tables at this pizza, a locally owned place, and was incredibly efficient and quick about the way he was doing that. So much so that after he saw it several times, he asked the young man, wow, you're really doing such a good job at that. And the story he shared was that, my owner told me that if I bus these many tables over the course of my shift and I get people seated more quickly, it means that over the course of our open hours, we see X more parties, and over the course of a year, we generate X more revenue. Now there's an individual who's got, what would be considered a lower level job in that company, feeling how valued he is and knowing what his contribution is. And that's the way we need to think about engagement. We've got to make sure that they're in. Because if we don't, especially with our younger workers, then money automatically rises to the top of the equation. And when it does, our youngest workers especially, that top line's millennials, the purple is Gen Z, and the blue is all employees. But they accepted a lower job, perhaps, or a lower salary because at the time they felt like they didn't have other job opportunities, but they will, as the market continues to improve, look for something better. They're confident in their value. We know there's skill shortages, so we have to be fair about compensation. But the truth is that if we're attracting the right people and we're helping them feel valued, money isn't the only answer. But it will be if the other parts of the equation aren't there. All of the years that we've been measuring retention, there's disconnects, again, in what employees say is important to them and what employers think is important to them. Employers still talk about a supervisor relationship, and that's number 7 on the list of employees, etc. So it's really about that communication, measuring, understanding in our own workplace. And again, it's different between generations. So without focusing too much time on that, I just want you to understand that we've got to continue to measure the drivers of both engagement and retention so that we can understand what's important to the employees in our own companies, in our own organizations. it makes sense that a lot of these things will be different by generation. So one of the things that we also are seeing is that even though we know these drivers are important, some of these retention programs really have decreased over previous years. So less training and development programs, less coaching and development, more bonuses for top performers is the only one that really went up. But employers do recognize that there's value in work-life balance programs. It increases the satisfaction and the productivity and the engagement and retention of workers. It also, again, builds your brand on how you're going to recruit workers. And so when we talk about work-life balance, what do we mean? Well, the most common ones we talk about are flex time, telecommuting, sabbaticals, and community service. Part paid time off for community service. But yet, 3 of 4 of those employees are saying their company is putting less into it than they were previously. Sabbaticals have gone up. When we think about technology and innovation, we know that there's a lot of brain drain, so there has to be an opportunity to recharge those batteries. And companies are doing that much more today. I shouldn't say much more, but certainly it's more than just in the educational arena that companies are looking at sabbaticals. And they might not be 3-month sabbaticals, but it's weeks or things that employees are able to, do something different and do something for themselves that really helps them recharge and be just more productive and innovative when they come back. But employees still say we struggle with work-life balance. Gosh, I travel a lot in my job and I still struggle with it. One of my work-life balance is that when I'm not on the road, I'm able to work from home. It's huge for me. It's a little thing, but it gives me that connection to family and things that I need to do, so it's not quite as painful when I'm gone. But technology isn't the biggest thing that makes people feel, that they don't have the work-life balance. It's the programs and what's offered and does it fit our needs. And it's another way of, again, asking what's important to your own employees and addressing those things. I know in our own company, we've got a wellness website, and I feel like, I try to eat right, I exercise, I do all those right things, but they've got all these fun challenges that you can sign up for. I don't personally take advantage of those, but I know that a lot of workers throughout our corporation do. And the thing is, it's a way to make it fun. It's a way to make it, more a part of our overall lifestyle. So programs that we offer don't have to be, again, one size fits all. Everybody needs to partake in it. I feel better just knowing our company's doing something like that, even if it isn't something that I need. So that's the way we have to look at those different things. Okay. So succession and talent planning. We're still doing okay on time. I want to give you guys a few minutes to comments and questions and things. The most important things are really recognizing, and this is, again, 2016 to 2017. We know that attracting and recruiting people are critical. We know that exiting baby boomers is going to change our population. Our millennials are the largest skill set or subset, I should say, of the workforce that we have today. Boomers, it's not that we skipped Generation X, but the boomers were the largest population, and now that's being taken over by millennials. And we can't forget Gen Z as well. The thing that we also know, though, is that, our youngest workers, we have to work on their ability, not to have the education they need, but really more to leadership skills and business experience and the life experience that's going to help. So succession planning, again, is really important to companies, but yet here too, just like workforce planning, almost half or a little less than half really are looking at it. So it's an important piece that's missing is succession planning. Employers today feel like what employees need is also what's missing So this is future skills needed. This is the skills workers currently lack. Problem solving, interpersonal skills, and that's really true, right? Spontaneous conversation is harder for some of our youngest workers because we're so good at smartphones and everything through email and technology that to have a one-on-one spontaneous conversation can be somewhat daunting. It's one of those skills we have to build. Written communication, technology we know about, and analyzing and interpreting data. This is an area where employees agree that, in order to be equipped and to be prepared, they need those things. They need training, they need skills. And while you can't read all of those, it's really talking about that their current job skills might fall short of what's required for future positions, even if they understand what they need today. And overall, it's this number, but again, our youngest workers feel that even more strongly. And they agree on the skills that are needed. Same things I mentioned before: problem solving, strategic thinking, interpersonal skills, analyzing and interpreting data. Most critical, I think, is again, that leadership and managerial training. Because I think of the way my own career developed over many years, and I had time. I worked even in this industry, I worked in an office, I became a manager, I became an area manager, I started working over a whole geography, different things like that, and I had time to grow my own leadership skills. We don't have that same time today to help workers grow over the course of a large amount of time. We not only have to grow the skill sets we need, but we have to find a quicker and better way for them to be more able to step into those leadership positions more quickly. And here's another area that employers and employees agree upon, and that's not such a good thing, because we don't really get a good grade for the training that we offer. And I want to pull up my notes for just a second on that, because a couple of things is that one of them is that some companies just don't analyze the training that they need or recognize what's important. Others, they might offer it and they might get the initial feedback like, whoa, I really like that training, but they don't do any deeper dive than the initial reaction to the training. The thing that's probably most important, we talk about the technology of training, and we have to make it more interactive. We as a company just revised our training. We were woefully behind because when the recession hit in 2008 and 9, guess what? Training for many companies is the first thing that gets cut. Now we were playing catch up. So we've got smaller vignettes and little workshops that people can do, and it is interactive even though it's online. But the truth is, it's about much more than that. It's really about an avenue that employees can take when they want it, and our youngest workers today are so much better at multitasking. I always tell the story that my oldest son was studying chemistry in high school, and he was watching TV and had headphones on, listening to music while he's studying chemistry, and it was like in my day, I had to be in a corner in almost a dark room, just reading word for word what I needed. He got a great grade in chemistry. It just wasn't the way that I learned. So the training that we offer, it has to be, and we have to recognize as companies that we multitask while we're doing things today. And then the final thing is how it's brought back and utilized. If we conduct training or provide training, but then the mindset from an organization top down doesn't reinforce it. Or I think of our business where we send people to our corporate headquarters in Atlanta for training, and then they come back to the office and they might not see that they might have learned something and say, well, why don't we do it this way? Oh, we just don't do that. And so if it's not reinforced that there's a better way, we quickly revert back to the way we did things before. And that's a waste of time, effort, and money. So that's why we've got to pay attention to not only how we train, what we train, but how it's embraced by the entire organization. So, wrapping things up, just, the key things that we really recognize today. And we do know that, again, we have to pay attention to emergent practices today as organizations, companies that, you're growing and incubating, because that's the only way you can attract all the workers that are currently available. Training is not just, even though, workers, if you looked at studies, they don't rank. If I looked at those retention drivers, training was lower on the list. But that's because it's accepted as a given that it's going to be offered. But it really needs to, again, really grow the skills that we need. And it's more than just online training or whatever classes it is. It's things like task forces and mentoring opportunities to help individuals, not only in the role they're currently in, but in the role they're trying to get to. Defining and measuring engagement, really is, again, the feedback that we get, and stay surveys from why do our employees like working for us? How can they bring that position to life to attract additional individuals? How are we going to know we're improving if we're not even measuring those things? And again, when we talk about an ideal employer, it really is about understanding who we are, what we do for the world we live in, and what employees are passionate about to help them to make sure that, we're walking that walk and that they're able to recognize their dreams and making the world truly a better place. Talked a lot about millennials, but our youngest workers, our Gen Z as we call it, right? Just entering the workforce. We've got to pay attention to them. And I know there might be one or two of you in this room today even. But the truth is that I always say that if we talked about, wrapping our arms and understanding millennials, our Gen Z is really millennials on steroids in a lot of good ways. I mean, because they grew up at a time where everything was on a smartphone, and they can get an answer to anything that they need, and if they don't get it from their friends or their parents, they get it online through a chat group. So they're always out there. They're the most entrepreneurial generation, the most culturally diverse generation that they have, the most interested in community give back and volunteering. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful group of generational workers that we've got stepping up into the workforce today, and we just have to understand the right way to communicate. Again, same thing with retention, and money does talk. I mean, we have to be market competitive in wages. It's certainly not the only thing, but money is important, and it's something that, we have to be sure we're checking. And probably just a side note is that we do have a salary survey that we put together every other year. It just came out a few months ago. So it's available not only locally, but also nationally. And that's something that Cindy can follow up with you on if that's something that you're interested in. We have a pamphlet that talks about local across all skill sets, but we also have is it a web key?
A jump drive.
Jump drive that will give you national data for the country. And then again, just succession challenges that we need to be paying attention to as our organizations are changing. So with that, I will say thank you. Got a few minutes, 10 minutes or so, to get some comments, questions, or feedback from anybody. Yeah.
Thank you. A great talk and awesome service. Nowadays, in many companies, there are, especially in tech startups, it's full of millennial workers, talents. But they sometimes also need to hire older generation. Is there really a gap between these generations in terms of the way of thinking, the way of conducting the work, and the scheduling, etc.? How do companies resolve that?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of understanding. I'm giving the same presentation tomorrow, but I'm giving it to a group that wanted to talk about communication in the workplace. And so just even from a standpoint of like attracting, boomers are veterans, right? Kind of been there, done that, might want to like stay closer to home. So our Gen X, lots of competing priorities. They need more flexibility and balance. Millennials are looking for the opportunities for career advancement. And Gen Z, we talk about wanting to connect, via mobile. I mean, everything has to be mobile to be in touch. But where the generations converge, for instance, is that online reputation, connecting to workers' passion, plus the mission that they believe in, all influence, the talent. So, I mean, I've got those same kind of little summary points for engagement and retention as well. I'm happy to share those with you. But a lot of it is just understanding those key differences between each generation, but also where they come together. And most of it's about communication. Asking and, addressing it in little bits. Just like I said, the one thing that I do, with that exercise program that the company, I don't join in, but I still think it's really cool that we have it. So.
And I know your question was more geared towards recruiting those individuals, but once you have them on board, asking your employees what kind of rewards they want. We received this kind of a neat survey, and I handed it to all my staff because just because one staff wants a gift certificate, as a reward, another staff might want something different, as well as some of them like public recognition, and others it will make them cringe. They don't want you to draw attention to them. So you can actually even just ask them how they want to be recognized.
But our youngest workers too want more immediate recognition. They don't want to wait till the end of a year to get an annual review and get rewarded that way. So the gratification when they do something, feedback, however it is, good or bad, but then recognition for that when it happens. And so we've changed the way that we've done it, even as a company. We don't do the same annual reviews we do. We just changed our dress code, and we call even at our corporate headquarters now, I'm calling it dress for your day or dress for your audience. So, things like that then, no matter who your generation is, our CEO said, I have a really hard time just thinking about a pair of jeans. I'm not as young as I used to be. I don't think I look as good in them. She was laughing last week. But again, she said she recognized how important it was, and people are really getting into it. It's something that we just changed at the beginning of the year. So things like that cross those generations in different ways. Happy to share more with you though, and a great question. Yeah.
Thank you so much for our presentation. Very informative data in there. I really like it. So the majority audience in here are startups. And I'm interested in learning, do you have any additional comments on, as a startups, how we position ourselves compared with big corporations to appeal to baby boomers, appeal to millennials and Gen Zs, how we position as when we recruit?
It really is, in my humble opinion, and I'm certainly not an expert, and Jenny might be able to give you even better tips than I could, but we have offices that start up from scratch. Even though we're a company that's been in business for 70 years, I support our franchise owner community, and if we have a location start in a new market, they're starting from scratch as well. So it really is about how you build your brand and how you communicate that brand to the community on what it means. It's about telling the story about the jobs that you're going to be doing and what that does for not only the community but the economy or the what's the word? Community? No. How we give back, what you're doing that's making the world a better place, and whether that's recognition for something that's important, a charitable thing, or whether that's something that's more energy, for instance, solar, whatever it is that's important, how we're making a difference in the world today.
I would agree. I would say one of the biggest things that I've heard between large corporations and then the startup environment is that in the startup environment you get to wear a lot of different hats potentially as a new employee or as at any level. And so that's kind of, I think that's part of the brand though, right? Letting the employees know you will get the chance to do all these things, whereas I know for some depending on what the corporation is, where the site is, where they're gonna be working, they might just be doing that one job.
And that may not be a good fit for a more traditional worker, right? So you may not be wanting to recruit a more traditional worker because they feel like they need that security and they need to know what the path is and they need to see a clear picture of how they're gonna, where they're gonna go with the company. You need somebody that's more of an emergent mindset that says, wow, I can help this company grow. Wow, I can be a part of creating something from the ground up. You know, you need to build that excitement about wearing the different hats and being involved in how they can be involved in creating this new company.
Additional question, probably try to detail a little bit. So I mentioned about money talks and people put money in their first priority in their employees. So the answer probably is where case by case is when you set a salary conversation for baby boomers, for millennials, is there any big trends for company, or like are they looking at more on the salary, on the titles, on the compensations, on the shares, on the benefits for different gens?
Yeah, there's a lot on that, and it might be a little more than I can even answer for, you know, in this amount of time, but be happy to get some information and data to you. But as Cindy was just saying, and I think I mentioned it a little bit, you know, the more that instant recognition is sometimes more important than just a bigger salary that you get every week. And so there's different ways to reward for projects and different things that get done as well. Money does talk, obviously, but if people are feeling valued and they're feeling fulfilled, even our youngest workers recognize that loyalty is important. We used to think, oh, they're just going to jump and jump and jump, and I know not all true. If they feel like they're contributing and they see a path, that's the other thing, then it's not all about the money. And so wherever you can build that up and say, you know, if we can grow this business here, here's the next opportunity, and then here's this. And as Cindy mentioned, while you're doing that, the more, even if you don't keep an employee forever, which we don't anymore, but the truth is, if you are helping them grow and that's something they take with them in their career, you're helping them, and guess what? They're contributing to you for the time that they're with you. And so I think all of that is so important.
This terminology of flash awards, it can be monetary, but it's like that instant recognition. So if you've got like she just said, if you've got a project or something and you meet a deadline and you get a $100 bonus, or when they can get something like that instantly like that, that's just spending money. I think that's really motivating. In our business, in my local company, we try to run some contests just to drive whatever project we're working on, whatever we need to work on, and we run. Sometimes they're silly, sometimes they're fun, but even a $25 gift card to go see a movie or something like that, those kinds of little flash awards really, I think, help morale. So.
And then the other thing I think that's important is that as a startup, you guys might have more flexibility than a big corporation has. And our youngest workers today, they're not as tied to this, like, I have to be there at 8 o'clock, not 8:02, but I have to be there at 8 o'clock. And companies sometimes go, wait a minute, you're late. And it's like, but I'm getting my job done. So if I'm there at 8:02 and I leave at 5:02, or I even leave at 4:45, but I got the job done, our younger workers especially look at those kinds of things. They're willing to work hard. They just don't define it as rigidly. And I think you guys in the startup mode have a lot more flexibility to address that. Working from home a day a week, you don't have to sit in an office environment if you're getting the job done. So it's how you create what needs to be done that appeals a lot more to people. And so I like that flexibility that you have to be a little more. Welcome.
Any other questions?
Only good comments. I'm kidding.
All right, well, we really appreciate this time that you've taken. Let's give our speakers a round of applause.